What happens when a prince who claims to advocate mental health awareness completely loses his composure on live television? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most shocking celebrity meltdowns ever caught on camera, and trust me, you won't believe how this royal interview spiraled completely out of control. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story gets more unbelievable with every passing minute. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. Camera operators adjusted their angles. Audience members settled into their seats, and the familiar theme music echoed through the Hollywood theater. Jimmy Kimmel himself was reviewing his notes backstage, preparing for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. Prince Harry was scheduled to discuss his latest charitable endeavors and upcoming memoir details, a seemingly straightforward conversation that would generate positive headlines and boost both their profiles. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Prince Harry, Jimmy announced with his characteristic grin as the studio audience erupted in applause. Harry walked out wearing a navy blue suit, waving politely to the crowd before taking a seat across from the host. The initial moments seemed perfectly normal, with Harry settling into the guest chair and adjusting his microphone as Jimmy shuffled through his index cards. "So great to have you here," Jimmy began, leaning forward with genuine enthusiasm. "I have to say, every time I see you in the news, you're either starting a new foundation, writing another book, or giving some interview about your personal journey. Do you ever just, I don't know, sit around and watch Netflix like the rest of us?" The question was clearly meant as lighthearted banter, the kind of gentle ribbing that guests usually laugh off with self-deprecating humor. Instead, Harry's expression immediately shifted. His jaw tightened, and he shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly not appreciating the implication that his work was somehow frivolous or attention-seeking. "Well, Jimmy, I think that's a rather reductive way to view meaningful advocacy work," Harry replied, his tone noticeably cooler than moments before. "When you've experienced the kind of trauma and institutional betrayal that I have, you don't really have the luxury of just switching off and pretending everything is fine." Jimmy's eyebrows raised slightly, clearly caught off guard by the serious turn the conversation had taken so quickly. The studio audience, sensing the shift in energy, felt unusually quiet. This wasn't the playful celebrity banter they had expected. "Right, of course, I didn't mean to minimize your work," Jimmy said, attempting to steer back to safer territory. "I just meant that everyone needs downtime, even princes who are changing the world. Speaking of which, your wife Meghan couldn't be here tonight, but I have to ask, how does she feel about you doing all these solo appearances lately? Some people are wondering if there's trouble in paradise." The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Harry's face flushed red, and his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Several audience members leaned forward, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Are you seriously asking me about my marriage based on tabloid speculation?" Harry's voice rose sharply, causing Jimmy to instinctively lean back in his chair. "This is exactly the kind of invasive, destructive questioning that drove my mother to her breaking point. You're supposed to be a comedian, not a tabloid journalist." "Whoa, hold on," Jimmy said, raising his hands in a defensive gesture. "I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. It's not like I'm making things up here. People notice when couples who usually appear together start doing separate events. It's a fair question." "Fair question." Harry's voice cracked with indignation. "There's nothing fair about dissecting someone's private life for entertainment. You have no idea what it's like to have every aspect of your relationship scrutinized and twisted by people who have never met you. Meghan and I are stronger than ever, but we don't owe anyone explanations about our personal choices." Jimmy tried to regain control of the interview, glancing nervously at his producers who were making frantic hand gestures from behind the cameras. The audience was dead silent now, clearly uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. "Look, I hear you, and I respect your privacy," Jimmy said carefully. "But you have to understand that when you put yourself in the public eye, when you write books and give interviews about your private life, people are going to have questions. You can't have it both ways." That comment proved to be the match that lit the fuse. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The sudden movement caused several audience members to gasp audibly. "Have it both ways." Harry's voice was now loud enough that the studio microphones were picking up an echo. "I've been trying to use my platform to help people, to break the stigma around mental health, to protect my family from the same forces that killed my mother. And you're sitting here suggesting that makes me fair game for whatever invasive questions you want to ask. Jimmy remained seated, but was clearly shaken by Harry's aggressive stance. Harry, please sit down. We're live on television here. Let's just take a breath and talk about this like adults. Don't tell me to sit down, Harry snapped. I'm not your subject to command. I came here as a guest, not as your entertainment to mock and prod for cheap laughs. This interview is over. The prince began to remove his microphone, but Jimmy wasn't ready to let him leave. The host stood up as well, knowing that letting a guest storm off would be a disaster for the show. Harry, come on, don't do this. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Your charity work, your book, anything. Just sit back down and let's have a real conversation. Harry paused in his attempt to leave, turning back to face Jimmy with a look of barely contained fury. A real conversation? You want a real conversation? Fine. Let's talk about how American talk show hosts think they can treat members of the British royal family like circus animals performing for their amusement. Let's talk about how you make millions of dollars exploiting people's personal pain for comedy bits. The accusation hit Jimmy like a physical blow. His face reddened, and, for the first time in years of hosting, he appeared genuinely angry rather than just playing a character. Exploiting people's pain? Jimmy's voice rose to match Harry's volume. I've been doing this show for over a decade, and I've never had a guest accuse me of exploitation. You came on here knowing exactly what kind of show this is. If you wanted a therapy session, you should have booked a different venue. The studio atmosphere had become electric with tension. Both men were now standing, facing each other across the interview desk like boxers in a ring. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing entertainment or a genuine breakdown. Camera operators continued filming, knowing they were capturing television history in the making. A therapy session? Harry's voice dripped with sarcasm. That's rich coming from someone who built his career making fun of people's vulnerabilities. At least therapists help people heal instead of turning their trauma into punchlines for late night television. Jimmy's professional composure was rapidly deteriorating. Years of dealing with difficult guests had prepared him for many scenarios, but nothing quite like this level of personal attack from someone he had genuinely respected. You know what, Harry? You're right. This isn't therapy. This is supposed to be entertainment. But you're making it impossible to entertain anyone because you're treating every single question like a personal assault. I asked you about Netflix and your wife, not your deepest childhood traumas. Everything is connected. Harry shot back, beginning to pace behind his chair like a caged animal. You people in the media, you think you can just pick and choose which parts of someone's life you want to examine and which parts should be off limits. It doesn't work that way. When you've lived through what I've lived through, when you've watched the press destroy everything you care about, you don't get to just compartmentalize. The audience was becoming visibly uncomfortable. Several people were whispering to each other, and a few had actually gotten up to leave. The producers were frantically trying to signal Jimmy to go to commercial break, but the host was too invested in the confrontation to notice. Okay, I get it. You've had a tough life, Jimmy said, his voice taking on a harder edge. But so have a lot of people, and they don't use it as an excuse to attack everyone who asks them a simple question. You came on my show, Harry. You booked this appearance. You knew what you were signing up for. Did I? Harry whirled around to face Jimmy directly, his eyes blazing with anger. Did I know I was signing up to be ambushed with questions about my marriage? Did I know you were going to sit there and make jokes about my advocacy work like it's some kind of vanity project? Because if that's what I signed up for, then maybe I made a mistake trusting you. Jimmy threw his hands up in exasperation. Ambushed. Harry, these are softball questions. This is basic celebrity interview stuff. I've asked much tougher questions to politicians, and they didn't have complete meltdowns about it. Don't compare me to politicians, Harry snarled. Politicians choose their life of public scrutiny. I was born into mine. I never had a choice about whether I wanted to be famous or have my every move analyzed by strangers. And after everything I've been through, after losing my mother to this exact kind of invasive media culture, I thought I could trust you to be different. The mention of his mother seemed to deflate some of Jimmy's anger, but it also made him more frustrated with the situation. Harry, I have nothing but respect for your mother's memory, but you can't use that tragedy as a shield every time someone asks you a question you don't like. That's not fair to me, and it's not fair to this audience who came here expecting a normal interview. Normal? Harry laughed bitterly. There's nothing normal about having your private life dissected for public consumption. There's nothing normal about having to defend your marriage to a stranger on television. And there's definitely nothing normal about being told by a talk show host that your grief isn't valid enough to influence how you respond to invasive questions. Jimmy ran his hands through his hair, clearly at a loss for how to handle the situation. I never said your grief wasn't valid. I'm saying that you're using it as a weapon against anyone who doesn't treat you exactly the way you want to be treated. That's not how the world works, Harry. The world. Harry stepped closer to Jimmy's desk, his voice rising to near shouting levels. You mean your world? The Hollywood world where everyone's supposed to smile and play along with whatever degrading questions you want to ask? Well, I'm not from your world, Jimmy. I'm from a world where actions have consequences, where words matter, where treating people with basic human dignity isn't too much to ask. The studio had fallen into an eerie silence except for the sound of Harry's heavy breathing and the occasional uncomfortable cough from the audience. Even the camera operators seemed uncertain whether they should continue filming or cut away. Jimmy took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain some semblance of control over his own show. Harry, I think we need to take a step back here. You're obviously upset, and I don't want to make things worse. Why don't we sit down, take a breath, and start over? We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Start over. Harry's voice cracked with disbelief. You think you can just apologize and pretend this didn't happen? You think you can humiliate me on national television and then smooth it over with some fake Hollywood charm? That's exactly the kind of superficial nonsense that I've spent years trying to get away from. Jimmy's patience finally snapped completely. Humiliate you? Harry, you're humiliating yourself. I asked you 2 basic questions, and you've spent the last 10 minutes having a public breakdown about it. I'm trying to help you here, but you're making it impossible. Help me. Harry's laugh was harsh and bitter. You want to help me? Then end this interview right now. Cut the cameras, clear the studio, and let me leave with whatever dignity I have left. Because if you keep pushing this, if you keep trying to make me the villain in your little television drama, things are going to get much worse for both of us. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jimmy stared at Harry for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. The audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Are you threatening me? Jimmy asked quietly, his voice steady but his eyes flashing with anger. On my own show, in front of my audience, you're actually threatening me? Harry's face was flushed red, his breathing labored, and his hands were visibly shaking. I'm not threatening you, Jimmy. I'm warning you. I'm warning you that I'm not going to sit here and be your punching bag. I'm warning you that I have limits, and you've already crossed most of them. And I'm warning you that if you don't end this interview right now, you're going to see a side of me that neither you nor your audience is prepared for. The studio felt like a powder keg about to explode. Jimmy looked toward his producers, who were making increasingly frantic gestures, then back at Harry, who was now gripping the back of his chair so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. You know what, Harry? Jimmy said finally, his voice cold and professional. I think you're right. I think this interview should end. But not because you're demanding it, and not because you've made threats. It should end because you've shown everyone watching exactly who you really are underneath all that advocacy and mental health awareness messaging. Jimmy's cutting remark about Harry's true character being exposed hit like a lightning bolt. The prince's face went from red to nearly purple, and the trembling in his hands became so pronounced that several audience members audibly gasped. This was no longer a heated interview. This was a complete psychological breakdown happening in real time on live television. Who I really am. Harry's voice rose to a pitch that made the studio microphones screech with feedback. You want to know who I really am, Jimmy? I'm someone who watched his mother die because of people like you. I'm someone who has spent his entire adult life trying to protect the people he loves from the same media vultures that destroyed her. And I'm someone who is absolutely sick and tired of being lectured about appropriate behavior by a late night comedian who makes his living mocking other people's pain. The audience was now visibly scared. Several more people had gotten up to leave, and those who remained were pressed back in their seats as if trying to distance themselves from the chaos unfolding on stage. The camera operators kept filming, but their hands were shaking as they held their equipment. That Jimmy's expression had shifted from anger to genuine concern. As a professional entertainer, he had seen celebrity meltdowns before, but nothing approaching this level of unhinged fury. "Harry, you need to calm down. You're scaring people. This isn't helping anyone, least of all yourself. Calm down." Harry began pacing again, but this time his movements were jerky and unpredictable. "You spend 20 minutes attacking everything I care about, questioning my marriage, mocking my work, dismissing my trauma, and then you tell me to calm down? Do you have any idea how many pills I've had to take just to get through interviews like this? Do you know what it costs me emotionally to sit here and pretend everything is fine while people like you tear me apart for entertainment?" The admission about pills sent a visible shock through the studio. Jimmy's producers were now frantically signaling for security, realizing that the situation had moved far beyond what they were equipped to handle. The host himself looked genuinely alarmed at the direction Harry's breakdown was taking. "Harry, I think you should sit down," Jimmy said carefully, as if he were talking to someone on a ledge. "Whatever you're going through right now, we can work it out. But you need to take a breath and think about what you're saying. This is being broadcast to millions of people." "Millions of people," Harry repeated, his voice taking on an almost manic quality. "Millions of people watching me finally tell the truth about what this industry does to people. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Maybe everyone needs to see what years of media abuse actually looks like when someone finally stops pretending to be okay with it." Harry suddenly grabbed his chair and slammed it down hard enough that the sound echoed throughout the studio like a gunshot. Several audience members screamed, and Jimmy instinctively stepped backward, bumping into his own desk. "Jesus Christ, Harry, what are you doing?" Jimmy's voice was now filled with genuine fear rather than anger. "Security. We need security up here right now." "Security?" Harry laughed maniacally. "You're calling security on me? For what? For finally standing up to the kind of treatment that has been slowly killing me for years. For refusing to sit quietly, while you and everyone like you profit off my family's misery." Two large security guards appeared from the wings, moving cautiously toward the stage. Harry saw them coming, and his expression became even more wild and unpredictable. "Oh, this is perfect," Harry shouted, gesturing toward the approaching security. "The comedian can't handle an honest conversation, so he calls in the muscle. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly the kind of institutional intimidation that I've been fighting against my entire adult life." Jimmy was now standing behind his desk, using it as a barrier between himself and Harry. "Harry, those men are here to help you. You're having some kind of episode, and you need help. Please just go with them peacefully." "Peacefully?" Harry's voice cracked as he turned to face the security guards who were now only a few feet away. "There's nothing peaceful about being silenced when you're trying to tell the truth. There's nothing peaceful about being medicated and managed so you don't make other people uncomfortable with your pain." One of the security guards, a professional-looking man in his 40s, held up his hands in a calming gesture. "Sir, we just need you to come with us. We're not here to hurt you. We just need to get you somewhere quiet where you can collect yourself." "Collect myself?" Harry spun around wildly, addressing the entire studio now. "You want me to collect myself? To put on the Happy Prince mask and pretend that everything is fine? Well, I'm done pretending. I'm done protecting everyone else's feelings while my own mental health gets destroyed by people who see me as nothing more than a source of content." The second security guard had quietly moved to Harry's other side, and together they began to gently but firmly escort him toward the exit. Harry didn't resist physically, but he continued shouting as they led him away. "This is what happens when you try to tell the truth in Hollywood," he yelled, his voice echoing off the studio walls. "They drug you. They silence you. They drag you away so the show can go on. But everyone watching this knows what they just saw. Everyone knows that I'm not the crazy one here. The crazy thing is a system that drives people to this point and then acts shocked when they finally break." As the security guards reached the wings, Harry made one final desperate attempt to address the audience directly. "I came here tonight, trying to have an honest conversation about important issues, and instead I got ambushed by someone who thinks my family's tragedy is fair game for comedy. Remember that when you're watching the edited version of this interview. Remember that. They didn't want you to see what really happened here." The security guards finally managed to escort Harry completely off the stage, leaving Jimmy alone with a studio full of traumatized audience members and camera operators who were still filming despite the chaos. The host stood motionless for several long seconds, clearly trying to process what had just occurred. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jimmy finally said, his voice shaky but attempting to regain some professional composure. "I think we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll have some music for you." As the cameras cut away and the studio lights dimmed, the audience sat in stunned silence. Many were crying, others were comforting each other, and quite a few were already reaching for their phones to share what they had just witnessed. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 minutes, but it had been so intense and emotionally charged that it felt like hours had passed. What had started as a routine promotional interview had devolved into one of the most shocking celebrity breakdowns ever captured on live television. The prince who had built his public image around mental health advocacy and emotional vulnerability had instead demonstrated exactly why some people questioned whether he was truly as stable and self-aware as he claimed to be. The footage would be analyzed and discussed for months to come, but one thing was absolutely certain. This was a side of Prince Harry that the public had never seen before, and it raised serious questions about everything he had said and done in the years following his departure from royal duties. The man who had positioned himself as a victim of media persecution had instead revealed himself to be someone whose relationship with reality might be far more complicated than anyone had previously imagined. So what did you think about this incredible breakdown? Have you ever seen a celebrity completely lose control like this on live television? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that you won't believe until you see them for yourself.